Just like sleep a little bit too much.
People got to speed up.
You got like usually there's a place for them. When we left, some of them either they replaced or. So, he'd walk to our house from his village.
Oh, cheese puffs today.
And Miles.
You know what? You have more stuff? Cool.
He learned a lot.
Hey, brother. No, good to see you, man. Yeah, good to see you. We miss you Wednesday night. Here, so.
Well, I ain't to Stafford till Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Are you living around by me?
yeah, actually, I'm close to York.
Oh,
Maybe 15, 20 minutes.
well, how did you run into me?
Here. Wednesday night. So I see the one that, you know, David works at Wingate.
Right.
So I see
Doing good.
Hey, good. Very
So you
good.
still working at,
After you lives up the road, yes, sir.
you must be a little higher up the food chain by
I
now.
am the warehouse supervisor.
Oh.
How's it going?
Good to see you this morning. Because we're getting ready to end the protect.
Oh.
I felt like it, huh? Felt like you just left here, that's right. How are y'all? Oh, you doing good, doing great, doing real
Well,
good.
you can sit there,
So
but
we're-
if you need me,
Good to see y'all.
Parents like, you should come last year.
Did we just leave here? Did we just leave here?
In charge of,
And, well, that's good, that's honest. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Good.
All right, let's see what we got, make sure we got volume. Yes. Good to have everybody with us this morning. We know where everybody's at. I know we have some out of town that told me they'd be gone. We're gonna be in Daniel chapter 4. We're gonna be in the area here of the pride and downfall of Nebuchadnezzar as we look to this, and make sure we're online. Just for those who know, if you're online with us this morning, yes, good. That it may be a little glitchy. We have no Wi-Fi, but I was able to figure out to hardwire everything in for this morning for temporary. So, but it does occasionally go up, back up, a little weird on the screen. So if it does that, just bear with me, everybody, here and online. All right. So Daniel 4, the pride and downfall of Nebuchadnezzar. We know the last couple of weeks we've been learning about King Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, King Daniel, and we're going to see this morning, we're going to continue to see where, what happens to him because of his pride. Before we get into that, let's go ahead and get into our questions. We're going to start our drill. Name the first 12 books of New Testament, so that'll take you through to Colossians. And if someone, everybody just go ahead and start yelling out.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans,
All right, good deal. That'll work. Sounds good. Perfect. All right, we're all there in the same thing. So, all right, let's continue into our other area. Where are we at? Here we go. Come on. There we go. All right, lesson 14. Going to the Genesis 49:50 with Jacob when he died and so did Joseph. And ask the question, to which of the sons did Jacob say, the scepter will never depart from you, nor the ruler's staff from between your feet? Judas, exactly right. Who's this giving reference to?
Christ.
Giving reference to Jesus, exactly right. Let's go to the next one. Next one, Daniel chapter 1, captives in Babylon. So name 4 young Jewish men who were chosen for training to serve Nebuchadnezzar's court. All right, everybody agree with that? That's right. Now, can you give me their Babylonian names? All right, I heard them. All right, good deal. We got them all. All right. Next question. How did Daniel persuade Nebuchadnezzar's overseer to agree to his food choices? Daniel 1, 8 through 16.
Try us out for 10 days.
Yep, he said, just like anything, someone says, go and try it for a few days, see if you like it. He said, just let us eat our way, with the vegetables and the water for 10 days, and you see how we turn out. And if it works out good, that's great, leave us on it. If not, take us off it. Well, it turned out great, and the overseer put everybody on it, on the same food. So I feel sorry for some of those guys. If they really like meat, they quit eating it. So it's like, are you kidding me? Now you're upset with Daniel. I wouldn't be happy. All right, let's go on to the next one. Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. How did Daniel know Nebuchadnezzar's dream and its interpretation? God provided for him, of course. Next one. Whom did Daniel give credit for the explanation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream? He gave it to God. Remember, Daniel, we never see Daniel taking credit for anything. He always gives it to God, every little bit of it. And and that's really the way it should be with all of us when we think about it. Which brings us to the 4th one. Nebuchadnezzar's dream, or well, before. Nebuchadnezzar's dream concerned events of the A, past, B, present, or C, future. I heard it. Say it again. Anybody? It was the future. It was the future. So remember, his dreams concerned what would happen in the future. That we understand would take place later down the road. And so we see that. All right, let's go to another one. Start getting good, you can see it. Name the 3 Jews who did not bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's golden image. Yes, in that chapter, in chapter 3, they're no longer called by their Jewish names. They're now being called by their Chaldean names. So we see that. So brings us to the next one. What did they say about God? Anybody remember?
He was able to save them, but if he didn't, they would still not bow down.
Exactly. He said if they're able to save them, that would be great. And he told Nebuchadnezzar basically, said, if we were delivered to your hand, oh well. Basically in a sense. So that's good to see that. So B5, Daniel, the fiery furnace. What happened to the men who threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fiery furnace? The men that got thrown, the men that threw them in were killed. They were killed instantly. But why were they killed? What did he heat the fire up? How many more times than usual? 7 times. 7 times. And it's interesting, once again, because we know what number 7 means throughout the Bible. Whole or complete or just right. And that's what we see happening with that. Which brings us to that was it. All right, so let's go to all questions done. We're in 605, Judah taken into Babylon captivity. They're still there, of course, as we go on a little bit further. So you see behind me, you see Judah, you see also Babylon, where we see the Babylonian Empire is at. And it brings us to this final one. We see where they're taking over everything in the world. And it may even extend a little farther than what we're seeing right here. But all right, so let's get over here. The pride and downfall of Nebuchadnezzar. As I said, last couple weeks, we've been learning about King Nebuchadnezzar and his role with Daniel, what's taking place here as the king of Babylon. We're basically finishing up with Nebuchadnezzar in a sense. What we see here in chapter 4. And King Nebuchadnezzar, we knew when we saw Wednesday night and others in the studies, chapter 3 and 2, that he had developed a deep respect for Daniel's God. I guess the best way to put it. He had a deep respect for him. But King Nebuchadnezzar had a fatal flaw. What was his flaw? Pride. It was. It was pride. It was the flaw of pride. And in chapter 4, we know that King Nebuchadnezzar tells his own strength. It's kind of interesting that's not Daniel saying, Nebuchadnezzar speaking, talking about this dream that he had. And it's kind of horrifying. It's a very horrifying dream of what we see taking place in the story, what pride will do to him. And this dream is going to become reality. And so we see that as most of the dreams that God sends, talking about prophecies and so on. There's 3 parts to the story. I guess you say a lot of preachers will use this word and put it to each one as glorifying, and we're going to see self-glorification, we're going to see glorifying grass, basically, in a sense, and then glorifying God, as we find all these areas of Nebuchadnezzar doing these things. So, as we think about this, let's go to this first part, Nebuchadnezzar's self-glorification. You know, he just thought great of himself, thought everything that he had was his ability, his reasoning behind it, that he did all of it. And even though I said no, it's important, he respected Daniel's God, but he didn't give him all the credit like Daniel did. And there's the difference. And he really didn't look at God the way he needed to be looking at God, because he still believed in his other gods. And even though he saw that they couldn't do what God does, God of heaven and earth, we know everything, universe. And so let's go ahead and look at this. Let's look at Daniel 4. We're going to begin verses 1 through 5. If someone will read that for us, please.
Nebuchadnezzar, the king, to all people, nations, and the languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. How great are his signs, and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation.
So before we go on to verse 4, it sounds like, I mean, you know, when you hear this here, here's Nebuchadnezzar talking very highly about God, isn't he? I mean, very highly. In fact, he said, you know, how great are his signs, how mighty is his wonders, his kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, from generation to generation. But he needs to really go one step further, which he's not doing. But let's finish verse 4, Brother Greg.
I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts on my bed and the visions of my head troubled me.
Thank you. So, when we look at this here, you know, basically what King Nebuchadnezzar is saying is, you know, I was just hanging out in my palace and just minding my own business, and then all of a sudden this dream came about. You know, and it wasn't just a dream that was you know, one he was working, was wondering what it meant. It actually concerned him. It really worried him. And to make a long dream short, which I could just tell you quick, don't read it, is that, you know, King Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about a huge tree, a gigantic tree that could be seen all over the world, grew to the heavens, it says. And the leaves were beautiful, the fruit was abundant on this tree. Wild animals took refuge under the branches. And we know that a holy messenger shouted out that the tree would be chopped down, leaving only a stump. So he's trying to figure out what exactly is this. Well, let's go and read what he says as we find Daniel 4, 6 through 14, please.
Therefore I issued a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers came in, and I told them the dream, but they did not make known to me its interpretation.
I'm going to stop right there for just a second, Ethan. So, think about this for a moment. The question is, what I'm really thinking about is, why is Nebuchadnezzar bringing these other guys in here? You know, they've already shown that they can't what? They can't answer the questions that he wants, and they can't do it. And it's nothing new. The same thing's going to happen again. And I think it's interesting how Ethan's about to read there, how it seems like at the end, Daniel finally came in. You know, I mean, or else he was sent for later. So we see that. And he is like the top head guy. I mean, he is over all these other people. And that may be the reason they came first, you know, just like anything, instead of the head boss coming first. And we see that. But we'll save a little bit of time. But Ethan, go ahead and continue to read for us, please.
But at last Daniel came before me. His name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God. In him is the spirit of the holy God. And I told the dream before him, saying, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy God is in you, and no evil troubles you, explain to me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and its interpretation. These were the visions of my head while on my bed. I was looking, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong. Its height reached to the heavens, and it could be seen to the ends of all the earth. Its leaves were lovely, its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it. The birds of the heavens dwelt in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. I saw in the visions of my head while on my bed, and there was a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, Chop down the tree and cut off its branches. Strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts get out from under it, and the birds from its branches.
Thank you. So, you see this here, the messenger's explaining this, and he's confused with it. So he's telling Daniel all about this, and we're going to find in a moment that Daniel's going to tell him the interpretation. And Daniel does something very important. We may have wondered about this. Daniel repeats what he heard from Nebuchadnezzar, then tells him the dream. He's very good about that. The reason here, I believe for us, is number one, just to remind us of what Nebuchadnezzar said, but also to show Nebuchadnezzar, look, this is what you told me. And in case Nebuchadnezzar may say, no, that's not what I meant. I meant this. And so he's doing that to reassure himself and to reassure him. Which brings us a little farther, because the messenger went on to saying something to Nebuchadnezzar, and this is what he continued to say in verses 15 through 16. Ethan, go ahead and continue to read that.
Nevertheless, leave the stump and roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts on the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from that of a man. Let him be given the heart of a beast, and let 7 times pass over him.
Thank you. So here's King Nebuchadnezzar. Didn't know what this meant, but he knew it seemed like it had to be bad news, because it went from good to what? The tree went from good to bad. And the tree, here it is. It wasn't that the tree just died over time. It was cut down. A good tree, that was doing a lot. And that was, was still producing stuff. It was cut down for what? Well, why? Why would anybody, how many of us here would cut down a tree that's producing fruit? More than likely you wouldn't. We see that being the case, especially which one that we want. So the dream terrified him. Once again, he called them magicians, all of them. And he says this at the end here, let 7 times pass over him. Now, I will say this, 7 times we see it is unclear actually what 7 times means. 100% we would say. Some speculate, of course, that it was 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, 7 years, or even some believe it was 7 seasons, summer, fall, winter, and spring, which would be 3.5 years. So but when it comes down really to it, most people go to the years, but we can't say that. We just don't know 100% for sure how much time it was. The truth is, as we look at this, that it was, whatever it was enough to kind of drive, Nebuchadnezzar a little insane, we would say, and it was enough to suffice what God needed him to see, what God needed, Nebuchadnezzar to feel, to be a part of, and to realize. And remember, as we know, once again, here's number 7 again. God uses number 7 for whole, complete, that perfection, and he does that. So, with all this happening, he said these next words in verses 17 and 18. Nebuchadnezzar did. Someone go and read that for us, please.
This decision is by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence by the word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the most high rulers in the kingdom of men gives it to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, declare its interpretation.
Thank you. So all this is being said to him of what's happening. And, he had, of course, once again, we see that he has great respect for Daniel's God. But at this point in the story, Daniel's God was not yet Nebuchadnezzar's God. It wasn't the one he really looked to. Wasn't the one that he followed. And he just thought he was doing a good job and everything with it. So Daniel's going to come to the story now. And Daniel's going to reveal what happens. And he's going to talk about this that Nebuchadnezzar is going to go through. And as we get ready to read, I want you to notice what Daniel says and how he reacts. Daniel is very concerned about saying this dream, giving this interpretation, because it's not going to be good for Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel has probably, even though he may not respect some of the things Nebuchadnezzar does, Daniel seems to have gotten to where he's fine being around Nebuchadnezzar. And I don't know if I want to go as far as say as a friend, but we do see the respect, mutual respect between them of what's happening here. So here's what Daniel says. I forgot verse 18. Finish the rest of it. There you go.
Since all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation, but you are able, for the Spirit of the Holy God is in you.
Thank you. So just remember everything I said right before that. All right, so let's go on to this one here, verses 19 through 26. And this is where Daniel's going to repeat a lot of what Nebuchadnezzar said, but he's also going to explain some things. So someone go ahead and read that for us, please.
Then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar,
That's it, you got it, Belshazzar.
Belshazzar, there you go, and was astonished for a time, and his thoughts troubled him. So the king spoke and said, Belshazzar, do not let the dream of its interpretation trouble you. Belshazzar answered and said, I will make the dream concern those who hate you, and its interpretation concern your enemies. The tree that you saw which grew and became strong.
Come on. There we go. Oh, hold on. Not too far. There we go. All right.
And as much as the king saw and watched her, a holy one coming down from heaven, saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave its stump and roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of the heavens, and let him graze with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which he has come upon my lord the king. They shall drive you from men, and your dwell shall be in the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like ox. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven. 7 times shall pass over you, until ye know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and yields it to whoever he chooses. And as much as they gave the command to leave the stump and roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be assured to you, after you come to know that heaven's rules.
Thank you. So as we see this, once again, Daniel tells the king here, he basically comes across saying, I wish I could say this about somebody else. I wish this wasn't about you. And it shows the respect they have there. But then Daniel's very clear, but it's not about somebody else. It is about you. And you're going to have to sit there and listen to what it's going to be. It's not going to be a good thing. So we see Daniel then advised King Nebuchadnezzar that he would turn from basically a human side, not that he would totally become an animal or something, his body, but he would turn from a human side to something else if, and here it is, I love how Daniel said, if you don't turn away from your sins. He's basically saying, if you turn from your sins, start being kind to the poor, and you would possibly avoid this awful moment, this awful time, whatever the 7 times is going to be. And as we know, when we hear this basically, he brings this out in these verses. If someone would want to read that for us, please. 27 through 28.
Therefore, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar.
Thank you. So here's Daniel. Daniel's giving him a way out, isn't he? In a sense, he's like, just become righteous, which we know more likely he's going to sin again, which he does. We see that, and not that he's going to be sinless, but that he's not allowing sin to be his full part of his life. And we see that now in the case. One of his main things was the poor. I guess Nebuchadnezzar didn't give to the poor, sounding like he took from the poor, and he wasn't doing what he needed to be doing. So as we see this happening, we find that it seems that King Nebuchadnezzar took the advice for a little while. For a little bit, he listened to Daniel, what he was saying, and here's what happened. It tells us how long it was before this took place with him. And I want you to notice what happens when we read this. As he's talking, this takes place. I mean, bam, that fast, because he's not relinquishing his sins and acting the way he should be towards others. And so this is what we read. Daniel 29 through 32, please.
At the end of the 12 months, he was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. The king spoke, saying, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty?
Let's stop right there and just say, Chad. So notice what he does. Here's one of the sins. Remember we said his biggest flaw was what?
Pride.
Pride. And notice earlier he was saying, you know, the king of, you know, the God of Daniel, you know, he's amazing. He's over, you know, his kingdom will never be destroyed. Generation to generation, it'll be there. He's amazing what he can do and everything with it. But then he gets very clear. He says, is this not this great Babylon that who's built? That I, notice, I have built, and dwelling by my mighty power for the honor of my majesty. Very important here. He's saying, I am who I am, and I'm alive today, and I'm still the one I'm going to be because of what I've done. Remember, God just gave him an extra year, and he forgets about it. So I'm going to go, before we finish it up, I'll get Chad just a second. Let's go ahead and go through the questions here.
This reminds me of the man who built bigger barns. It was always I. He forgot God. That was his only problem.
Exactly right.
That seems to be the same thought. It's just something that just carries on through the centuries of mankind.
Yep. And we've seen many people through history be destroyed because of it, because of the pride that they had. David, go ahead.
I was going to say that, you know, we've often heard that the middle letter in the word pride is I.
Right.
And, you know, reminds me, when you think of, you know, Proverbs 16:18, pride goeth before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. My mind always goes to King Nebuchadnezzar.
Yep.
Just a living example of that verse, because you see the pride at the beginning. You see, I've done all of this. And then you see the destruction after. You see what happens to King Nebuchadnezzar, who isn't completely destroyed, but you see the point of the consequence of his pride.
Yeah, you see his great fall very quickly. I mean, and that's exactly right. And so we see that. So it's an important thing to think about as we look at this even for ourselves today. Brother Chad, you continue verse 31.
While the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice fell from heaven. King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you. And they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you eat grass like oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomever he chooses.
Thank you. So, you know, these are exactly the words that were already said to Nebuchadnezzar a year ago. These same exact words. And as you look at this, it's interesting, you know, that it says 7 times, but, and this is where I get into my thought, you know, is 7 times actually a number? I mean, is it actually a season, is it actually a year, a day, or is it something different? Because I think it's interesting what he's told here. Notice how it says, 7 times shall pass over until you know that the Most High rules. So it all comes back to Nebuchadnezzar. He has the ability to get himself out of this. And the way I believe we've been saying here is it's going to take 7 times of whatever this is before he wakes up. And I would think, if I look down and I'm growing feathers, you know, hair like feathers, I'm growing, you know, claws on my nails are just growing out like crazy, and all I want to do is eat the grass, I think I'm asking God to forgive me immediately, you know what I mean, right away. But here's how bad pride is. Even with him in this moment, we see this, that he's still prideful in what's taking place. Or else he probably wouldn't have gone as long as he did, or however this was going to work. And the 7 times, some have also said, and I thought this, is maybe the 7 times was going to start out 7 days. Maybe his pride was still there. It took 7 weeks. Maybe it took 7 months. We see that. But the main thing is that he did not get where he needed to be. So this pinpoints back once again to his main sin, pride. And you think about these words that are around this word pride here: vanity, self-ambition, impatience, you know, showing off, you know, boasting, self-righteousness, conceit. All of these areas. Anybody ever know anybody like this? You ever know any? No one's known anybody like that ever? Really? Wow, you've been living in the wrong area then. No. I mean, I'll just tell you this. Living in D.C., right next to D.C. and everything, there's a lot of people with this problem right here. A lot of people. And thought they were self-made people in the way they were. And there's, you know, nothing wrong with a self-made person, but you need to realize where your thoughts and understandings and who it needs to go to that you're thankful for what you've had and what you've gotten in this life. So he was completely glorifying himself. And of course, if anyone had an excuse for pride, it seemed like it would be King Nebuchadnezzar. I'll just say this: nobody has an excuse for it. But we do know, without a doubt, that he ruled one of the greatest, most widespread and powerful kingdoms in the entire world. Some say possibly in all of history, even though Rome took more area, but it seemed like Nebuchadnezzar was in more control than we see Rome. he failed to realize that in the eyes of God, pride is never a small matter. I'm going to give you a quote here. I want to read. I'm sure everybody will know the name C.S. Lewis. I like C.S. Lewis. I know he changes some things, the Bible and so on and all that. But he's a good writer, and he says good things, and every once in a while he makes really good quotes. And here's the quote he said about pride. I love this. He says, "The essential vice, the utmost evil, is pride. Unchastity, anger, greed, drunkenness, and all of that are mere flea bites in comparison. It was through pride that the devil became the devil. Pride leads to every other vice. It is the complete anti-God state of mind." That I truly agree with that. That the anti-state of mind, because it is when you no longer have God. It's all about you. God is disappearing from you. Not that He's leaving, but you're throwing Him out. And that's what we see with this here as we go through. David was first. I'll go to David. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Proverbs chapter 6, when Solomon says these 6 things the Lord hates, 7 are an abomination. The first description is a proud look.
That's right.
And I think, I don't think that's an accident. I think that's listed first because everything else can be really traced back to that. Why would someone lie or bear false witness? Why would someone be quick to run to mischief or sin? It's because it's not about God, it's about
That's right. And you're right. And it's interesting you say it because pride we say being the first. And it's interesting when you go back to Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, first thing He said in the Beatitudes was poor in spirit, which is humility. And we see that. Dad, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you think about today, pride is the thing that I think keeps a lot of people from stepping out of the aisle and coming forward, or they don't necessarily have to come out there, but to admit. It's hard to admit sin. It's hard to admit that you think that everything revolves around you. And that is, like David said a little bit earlier, pride comes before the fall.
Yep. That's exactly right. All that. So, and this is what we see that, with Nebuchadnezzar, and God was about, I guess the best way to put it, God was about to give King Nebuchadnezzar and us a graphic picture of really how human pride looks in God's eyes. How it looks in God's eyes. And as we see, human pride to us is like, we're the best, we're everything here. And God sees you just like basically like an animal. And what's that?
I was going to say He made Nebuchadnezzar probably, everybody looked at him as, laughing, making fun of him.
That's right, exactly. And, he never had that before. And if someone did, he had the power usually that he would just chop them up. Like he said, I'll chop you into pieces, And that was one of his favorite lines, I guess we read in the Bible there. So here he is, God's going to go ahead and make him glorify grass. And so as we see him glorifying grass in chapter 4, verse 33, now this is exactly what he looked like. You know that, right? No, I'm kidding. And so, there's many different pictures, of course. The only difference this one, I believe, is that he would be down on all fours, like an animal, and eating the grass. And when it talks about chewing the grass, it's like a cow chewing the cud, down all the way down in there, getting to it. And you think about living on that, what it would have done to his, his stomach and everything with it, just what it would change. And so let's go ahead and read what it says here, chapter 4, verse 33. And someone read that for us, please.
That very hour the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men and ate grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. Isn't
that remarkable? This is where we get to the point where we wonder how long. We know, and this is where I say, we say, was it days, weeks? I don't know anybody's caught nails who've ever gone that fast in a week, or even a month. And nails grow out, but to get to this point, this is where a lot of people believe it was 7 years is a long time. Like I said, we don't know for sure, but when we start hearing these things, like, okay, this makes sense. So could you imagine this? Could you imagine a human coming to this point? And I know I'll say this: there have been people that are insane, that have eaten grass, that have tried to live on it, and that we see that. And but this dream came true. In fact, this dream was no longer a dream; it was more like a what now? was reality. It was more like a nightmare, what was, scaring you. So the great glorious ruler, so sure of himself, so feared and respected this powerful king, was now reduced to the status, and don't think I'm saying animals are dumb, but to a dumb animal. I mean, that's really the way God looked at it. The way people looked at it. Like, look at this guy out there. He can't do anything. Animals, wild animals, of course, survive on their own and so on. But once an animal becomes domesticated, who do they rely on? They rely on us, or food to be thrown out, them to get on the streets, wherever they may be. And so here's the same thing with Nebuchadnezzar. I always find it interesting. We don't read of anything about anybody going out trying to help him. What's wrong with you? Let's get you fixed, and we just don't see that. And I believe which leads a lot more to people probably didn't really like Nebuchadnezzar, really, when it came down to it. We see here. Dad, go ahead.
But here's one thing too. His physical appearance changed.
Yes.
But his mind did not, because God said, look, when you come to your senses,
Yep.
Everything will go back to normal.
That's right.
So here he is, he's tormented in his own mind at what his appearance is and trying to figure out what do I do?
Exactly. That's where comes the belief that, he had some screws loose because of what he did, the way he would kill people and everything else. You can't be normal to do those kind of things. But here it is. The man had enough knowledge and things to figure things out. And that's what I always think about that he's going through this the whole time, knowing that's not where he belongs, knowing what he needs to do. So with all this happening, we see the physical picture. It's kind of the physical picture of spiritual truth. What happens in us when we decide to leave God. And, God looks, and here it is, God looks on the heart. We need to understand it. He doesn't look at us from the outside. He looks to the inside. And from the very beginning, this prideful, self-proclaimed king had a spirit that was dull and senseless, basically doing everything for him. Didn't matter if people agreed with him or not. He was going to do his own thing. And we see, a lot of kings in history like that. A lot of kings. Once they feel that power and they get to that point, guess what? I'm going to do what I want. So here it is 7 times. Just going to finish it up. Verse 34 through 36. If someone go ahead and read this for us after the 7 times, of course, God's going to give Nebuchadnezzar's life back to him. And I want you to get that. Nebuchadnezzar didn't figure out the secret. God gives it back to him because he realizes finally Nebuchadnezzar does where he's at. And if someone go ahead and read that for us, please.
And at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation.
Thank you. So he said the same thing he said before, but he added something to it. And here it is. I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him for who lives forever. There you see the pride disappearing, and we find this. And I want us to really realize this, to understand something that you said a moment ago, that his mind was working, and the reason we know is, remember who is telling the story. It's not like he forgot what happened, or this is Nebuchadnezzar telling everybody what happened to him, what went on. So from this time on, King Nebuchadnezzar, we say from this time on, King Nebuchadnezzar actually gives glory to God. And which brings us to that next point, but let's go ahead and finish these verses 35 through 36, David.
All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, what have you done? At the same time my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom my honor and splendor returned to me. My counselors and nobles resorted to me. I was restored to my kingdom. Excellent majesty was added to me.
Yeah, thank you. So here, you hear at the end there, it sounds like me. But he's saying it's because of God. And there's the difference we find that. So what do we see? We see him glorifying God now. And we're going to go and read this verse here, this last verse. If someone, if you can read it, watch more than I thought. If someone could read that for us, please. Somebody with good eyes.
Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor thee. For all his works are right, and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride, he is able to humble.
Thank you. I love how that is. He says, the King of heaven. But the last part here of this verse, Nebuchadnezzar says, trust me. Trust me. If you're prideful, God can humble you. And, and that's exactly what we see. So what happened to King Nebuchadnezzar was unique. know, we've never heard of anything quite like this, ever. I mean, when you read the Bible, and probably the closest to it we would think of an animal and a human is, of course, that was Jonah, Jonah in the well. But, a king eating grass for all this time period, and on the other hand, the spiritual experience represents is more common than we probably want to think about, or, even go through. And, and we have that in this life. See how much time I got? 1 minute. Let me, we asked this question. There are a lot of grass eaters in this country. What I mean by that, there's a lot of people that will leave the things they need to be doing. They need to be following who God and other things just to do something they want themselves. And how many times have you heard that, that a spouse maybe give up their whole family for a couple of years, whatever, with somebody else, and then they're lost forever. Or, just whatever kind of sins are out there, the things are out there, that's actually going after that grass, that's eating that grass. And I'll just tell everybody this, you eat grass, you probably don't want to eat it long. And so when you think about sin, when sin comes into our hearts and into our minds, what do we need to do immediately? We need to humble ourselves and ask God to forgive us. And this is the thing about God. God said, what will He do when we ask Him to forgive Him, those who are Christians? 1 John 1, He's faithful to do so. He'll forgive us. And that's a great thing. So there's the story. Basically, we have Nebuchadnezzar and everything he went through. It's a story, really, that none of us would ever want to be a part of, but it's something to remind us. I will say this. Most people in the world would say that aren't followers of God or Christ, they say that's just a fictional story. And I'm going to say this. No, it's not. Because God said it was true. And it's very clear about that. Which brings us down to this very last verse of the New Testament today. As we see here in James chapter 4, verse 6. God resists the proud, but gives grace to who? To the humble. And that's where we see that we need to be and continuing that. And David, you have a comment? Go ahead before we close.
I was just going to say, it brought to my mind the prodigal son. He was selfish, prideful. Well, I want my share now.
Yep.
And he goes off, and of course he spends all of his money on wickedness, and eventually he gets to a point where he experiences a humbling situation. Not exactly the same as Nebuchadnezzar, but what's he doing? He's wanting to even eat of the husk of the swine, and nobody's willing to help him.
Right.
And he realizes, wait a minute, my servants were getting better treatment, or my dad's servants were getting better treatment than I'm even getting right now. He realizes what he had before, and he goes back.
That's exactly it. And I'll say this, we need to understand. Some people, it takes a while, and they realize what they lost and go back. And it's not always going to be the same. You go back, it may not always be the same. There's consequences to sin. But here's the thing about God, is that God is always, we already said, willing to forgive us completely. And here's the thing about God also, He forgets it. We've said that many times. It's not there, it's gone, and we see that. Doug, go ahead.
It may have taken Nebuchadnezzar a little bit longer to come to his senses, also because at that time, the next town may have been 500 or 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
So you're put out into the wild. You're by yourself. So he's eating grass. His hair is growing. He has nothing to cut his nails with. So in a couple of years, you would not be indistinguishable from Sasquatch or somebody.
Sasquatch, exactly right.
And so that may have been, and it doesn't say how long it actually took him to come to his senses, but he did.
That's right. I love that description, Sasquatch. That's exactly right. We see that. So I appreciate all the comments and everybody. Thank you. Raining?
Yeah.
Raining? All right. But everybody, Bill hadn't heard that yet. So what was that? Yeah. Oh yeah. All the bells are good. Yeah. All right. Oh yeah. By the way, ding ding ding. We're out of class. All right. There you go. Go ahead and talk. I don't have any in here. I need to put one in here, I guess. Oh, I thought I heard it. I can't tell if the ring in there, running there or not. Unless I heard them over there and there, but I don't. Unless they unplugged it. I'll have to check.